Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at onpurposely.com.
Hi, it's Meg. And because this is a family-friendly podcast, I want to take just a moment to let you know this story contains some sensitive content that might not be safe for young ears. If you have young kids listening, please take note and consider putting in earbuds.
There's too many Christians that they don't feel like God is still doing miracles, and He is. And I am a miracle, and I've seen miracles, and I will forever keep those close to my heart because they're a reminder that He's still doing miracles. He's still here. He's still capable.
And now for the next episode of Letters from Home, sending encouragement to your doorstep by capturing the heartbeat of God's people, one story at a time.
Hi, this is Meg, your host. I trust you have thoroughly enjoyed our From the Vault series. And now, we have prepared for you a whole new lineup of encouraging stories. Enjoy! Do you believe in miracles? This is an important question to ask. Do you know anyone who is a living miracle? I bet someone comes to mind. Today's story is heavy and so redemptive. It is definitely a bumpy ride. But in and through every turn, you will hear how our God is the God of forgiveness and the God of miracles. Today, here is the faith story of the everyday, extraordinary Shauna Parker. Shauna, I am so happy to have you on Letters from Home. We've just recently met through Instagram and interacting through some of the comments in each other's accounts. And I was like, man, this lady is amazing. And you commented something so personal about your story, and we've connected, and you just felt like it was a great opportunity for you to share your story. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm humbled.
God has been so good. And, we're talking the other day, you have been through so much, and, let's just get right into your story. So I know your story didn't start how it starts with most people. So
I like to think that my story started when I was born. When I was born, I'm not really sure what happened. I've been told different stories, but my mom, I think her pelvic bones collapsed on my head as I was being born, and my skull was actually crushed in, and I had two black eyes, a broken nose, and I think, this was in 1979, so they probably thought that I was going to be mentally disabled, and I wasn't. So that I believe was a miracle in its own.
100%. Wow.
Yeah. Actually, my baby picture, I think I was a week or two old in it, and you can still see the my head is kind of dented in, and I had the two black eyes and the broken nose.
Did your mom recover?
Yeah.
She must have been really, really in pain trying to take care of you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they actually had to emergency cesarean. And the crazy thing is, it's the same hospital where what happened to me with my son, which is what I'm going to tell you about later. It's just crazy.
Whoa.
And I was her second child too.
So already starting out just early in life, your parents were like, this child is a miracle.
Yeah.
Looking back, like you knew you were a miracle. What was it like as a little girl?
Well, my parents divorced. I was either 2 or 3. And I actually moved in with my aunt and my uncle, which was my dad's brother and sister-in-law. And they weren't rich, but they had a good living. So I would go and see my parents on the weekends. So I'd see my mom one weekend and my dad the next weekend. And I tell people that I was raised on 3 sides of the train tracks. You hear I was born on the wrong side of the train tracks. I lived on all 3 sides of the train track.
Wow.
So my aunt and my uncle, my uncle had a good job, and it was a nice environment. And then when I would go to my dad's house, my dad was, he was a single man, and I just love him so much. And he was always there for me. And he worked, and that's what he did. He worked and he came home, and he was a Christian. He was a Sunday school teacher. And then when I go to my mom's house, It was full of drugs and alcohol.
Oh.
And I seen things I shouldn't have witnessed as a child. Like men would beat my mom all the time, like in front of us kids.
Oh.
And my brother
man.
lived there full time. So he's seen this 24/7. And I only seen it every other weekend. And there was one time in particular that I went to visit. I think I was there for like 3 weeks of the summer or something. I don't really remember. I just remember the incident that happened. We were in what they call the housing. It's housing. The government kind of pays for it, and then you pay what you can. I was visiting, and we were in one of those apartments. And the guy that she was dating at the time, he boarded all the windows up and the doors. He like boarded everything shut, and he took us upstairs. And I remember that he put me and my brother on this king size bed, and he had my mom tied down in this chair, and he was holding a knife to her throat. And I was like 5 years old, I think. And he was telling me and my brother that if we cried, that he would cut my mom's throat. You know, we were kids, so of course we cried. And thankfully he didn't cut her throat, but he did like just enough to where she bled just a little bit. And then this is the only other thing I remember. He took us, I remember his mom was at the door banging and telling him to let her in. And he took me and my brother in the other room, and he whipped us on the bottoms of our bare feet with race car tracks. And that's the only thing I remember.
Did his mom come in or say anything, or?
I don't remember anything else. I just remember, I don't remember my aunt and uncle picking me up. I don't remember anything.
Awful thing. Yeah.
And that's how a lot of it was when I visited my mom. I just remember like things. And there was some good times. Unfortunately, she was a very heavy alcoholic back then. She's come a long way since then.
Did your aunt and uncle, were they aware that you and your brother were going through this kind of thing? And were you able, you were so little, I mean, it's really tough, but were you able to ever talk to them about that when you were little?
I think I kind of stayed hush about a lot of stuff because I loved my mom and I wanted to see her. And I think I was more scared that if I told them what was going on, they wouldn't let me go back.
Yeah. You loved your mom. You're a kid. You don't know that.
Yeah.
It's not normal. Yeah. That's rough. And so your mom's still around. So she lived through that rough period. And
yes, she's still around.
Did something ever happen, come to justice with that fella?
No, I did find out that he did pass away a few years ago. They finally broke up and they went their separate ways, I think shortly after that.
Were you ever able to broach the conversation with your mom?
Talking about the past with my mom is very hard because she dwells on the past. But she sometimes adds stuff that didn't happen. Or she just gets fixated on something. There was one time when I think I actually moved in with my mom. I was a little bit older. I think it was 12 or 13 maybe. Her boyfriend at the time, this is a different guy. I think the story is that he was on some drugs and he had actually molested me. And when I confronted my mom and told my mom about it, she called me a liar and told me that I was lying.
Whoa.
And so ever since then, it's been really hard for me to discuss certain things with her.
Yeah.
Especially the past.
I guess I'm wondering for you as a daughter, the people that you should be able to love and trust the most, who are looking out for you. Seems like you haven't really gotten that care from your mom, or even for her to acknowledge that she was being so horribly, and I mean, tying up that's next level, like really intense, and all the stuff she went through. And I know she has some substance abuse and stuff that I'm sure affected her thinking and all that. But so she never really talked about her. And then it sounds like she's never really, you've had to be the mom in the situation. And she's not really looked out for you as a daughter or tried to look after your healing or apologize or anything.
Right. Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. That's really hard in a place that God, that's what I think of. I think God's eyes were open.
Mm-hmm.
He loved you then. He knows everything that's happened, and he can heal. You know,
Yeah.
I believe he can heal.
Yes, he can.
I know that's part of your story too.
Definitely.
So did that feel more like a bright spot? You had your aunt and uncle, praise the Lord, is amazing. And your dad,
Yeah.
you're probably like, I think I can see why they got divorced.
Yeah.
You know, your mom was
yeah.
on the struggle bus.
And I've come to forgive her, and even the man that molested me. It was later in life, of course.
It's a lot to forgive it. Do you feel that your dad has been supportive, whether or not he shared that with you? I mean, like you were able to share that with him or not, but like as a little girl, did you felt loved by your dad and safe?
Yeah, absolutely. My dad was the best dad. I mean, he was always there for me, even when I lived with my aunt and my uncle. I remember a time, I think it was right before I moved in with my aunt and my uncle. I think my parents were actually still married. I came down with pneumonia, and I was in the hospital for like 2 weeks. And
wow.
I never seen my mom one time. My dad was there every single day. And I think that's why I'm so close to him, because he's just always been there. And, you know,
That's
sometimes
wonderful.
men, it's hard for them to express emotion, but I could always tell that my dad loved me, and I always knew that he cared for me. I knew that my mom loved me, but the way that my dad was there for me, it was just different.
Oh, wow. That's really cool. It's so true. The thing where they said, you remember how somebody made you feel? Don't you think about that? I think about that as a mom now.
Yeah.
I want my kids to feel loved and welcome and accepted and all those things, you know?
Yes. Yes. One of my favorite memories of my dad is he was an artist, and he didn't have a car when I was growing up. So when I would go visiting, we'd walk all over town. And there was one time we walked to a cemetery, and he seen this rose, and he was like, will you sit down by the rose? And he drew a picture of me sitting next to the rose. And I just always remember that memory.
Is your dad around?
He is.
Still?
He is.
He is. Okay.
73.
Well, I'm glad you have your dad and your mom in your life still. That's good. And you know what? Relationships are always so complicated.
Yeah.
Let's go back to your, time with your aunt and uncle, and praise the Lord. It sounds like they were good to you too, and a place of stability and comfort and safety. Yeah,
absolutely. They were Christians. It was a good home.
That's wonderful. So is that where your faith story began?
I think it kind of really began with my dad, because I would go, even though they were Christians and we went to church, on the weekends that I was with my dad really talked about God a lot. He talked about Jesus. Like I was 6 years old and I was terrified of the rapture because my dad he told me everything. He didn't hold anything back. And I don't think he realized I was a kid and I couldn't take everything in, but he just loved Jesus so much that he would just tell me everything. And I think I was 8 when I got saved. I believe it all started with my dad. Yeah.
That's really cool. Would you say there was a time that you felt like your relationship with the Lord really grew?
So I moved out of my aunt and uncle's when I was 9, I think, because my dad remarried. And I lived with my dad and my stepmom until I was 13. And that's when I moved in with my mom. And that's kind of when I fell away from God.
Oh, yeah.
I turned 13. I was living with my mom. And of course, there was a lot of alcohol and drugs and just influence. And my mom, she would just drive us around drunk. And I would just get so angry at her. I wasn't doing drugs or anything like that. But I think when I turned 15, I started smoking marijuana. And then we moved to this small country town. And then my mom was still heavy drinking. She met this guy and he actually drove a truck over the road. And the next thing I knew, I started dating the boy next door. And the next thing I knew, we were at the courthouse and my mom and his mom were signing papers for us to get married.
Whoa.
And yeah. So it happened so fast that like, it was just, we were in the preacher's living room getting married before I knew it. My mom was nowhere to be found. She had ran off with her boyfriend.
Do you feel like she was pushing you in that direction?
I do kind of feel like I feel like my mom and his mom got together and planned it.
Wow.
Is what I feel like. Because we were both just kind of like taken back, like, okay, here we are.
So your mom took off and then you're just married super young and like, wait, what did we just do kind of? Should we move in together?
Yeah.
What should we do?
Yeah. So my mom just left and of course I couldn't stay there by myself. So I moved in with him and his family and it was not good. We stayed married until we were 19. We had a little girl in that time. I was actually had my daughter. I was 2 weeks before my 18th birthday. It was not a Christian home. It was just, there was a lot of arguing and a lot of chaos. And we had actually moved out on our own. And he ended up cheating on me with my best friend. And that's when I was like, okay, you know, I was still a believer, but I also knew that was grounds for divorce. So I had went and I talked to an attorney and I got custody of my daughter and we got divorced. And then I would say after that is when I was already fallen away from God because I wasn't in church. That happened when I moved in with my mom. But after that is like really when things started to go downhill. And
you had your daughter. Did you move back in with your dad?
I did. I moved back in with my dad. I was staying in his basement with my little girl.
Aw.
She would go and see her dad on the weekends. And when I didn't have her, I was trying to fill this void in my heart. Mm-hmm. And so I was just going out partying. I couldn't keep a job. And I was doing anything and everything I could to make me happy. What I thought was making me happy, but it wasn't really making me happy. So I experimented with cocaine. I smoked a lot of weed. I drank a lot of alcohol. I went to a lot of clubs and not proud of it. And it took me a long time because of the things that I did. I was like, I was really ashamed. But when I look back now, I'm like, that person made me who I am today.
Yes. I know God has this beautiful way, and we'll get into it more in the PS of just taking something that the enemy wanted shame around and saying, actually, no, Shauna, I want you to be a life coach.
Yeah.
And all the experiences that you've had, because you have had an insane, and just even up to, you're not even 20 yet, and you've had enough traumatic experiences for 5 lives. That must have been a tough time for you and a tough time for your dad too. Did he try and speak into any of your life at all, or?
He just kind of gave me my space. He would say things from time to time because he knew. He didn't really say that he knew, but he knew. I knew that he knew. It was that time in my life. I was in my early 20s. I just didn't want to be told what to do.
Right.
And I was kind of rebellious. It definitely was. And, the crazy thing is, looking back, the one thing I remember always thinking was, I always have tomorrow to get right with God. And I don't know why I would think that. And I wish I could go back and change that, but I can't. But it makes me think differently today when, I have a habit of reading my Bible every morning, but like if I read my Bible, I'm like, no, I have to go have my time with God. I get to have my time with God. And it's very important to me now. And I wish it was back then, but I hate that I had those thoughts because we don't know if we have tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Tomorrow may never come.
Here you are, healthy and whole, happily married with kids and all those things. I know somehow that turned around. How did that turn around? Was it in your 20s that things kind of turned around a bit?
Yeah. My daughter, I think she was 8 or 9. I was like, okay, I got to do something different. I was like 20, I think I was like 25 or 26. I was like, I'm tired. I'm done. And I was like, okay, God. And I did my best to give it to him, but I didn't really give it to him because I still wanted control.
Yeah.
And I didn't really understand at that time what giving control to God meant. So I quit the drugs. I quit, just everything.
Just all by yourself.
I did. I just quit cold turkey.
Wow. That's amazing. That's very difficult.
Yeah. The only thing that I kept doing was smoking cigarettes, but I was able to quit later. Then I met a guy and I was still trying to fill that void. I didn't even love him. I don't even think I was attracted to him, to be honest with you. But he had a house and he tried to make, everything look so good. And then before I knew it, he was like offering me all this stuff that I wanted, like a husband and another baby and just, the life, the family life. And here I was living in my dad's basement and he made it sound so good. I was just like, okay. And then we got married. And I instantly regretted it. Actually, I regretted it the day that we were getting married. And I didn't know how to get out of it. Yeah, I didn't know how to get out of it. So I just went through with it. He was not a believer. He would say things that made me, he was mentally abusive. So no man has ever put their hands on me. And that was one thing that I always promised myself I would never allow to happen, especially in front of my kids, because of what I seen happen with my mom. But he was very mentally abusive. He would just say things. And I would have to ask to use the car to go to the grocery store. It was bad.
Oh.
During this time, I started, my daughter went to Bible school at this church, a few blocks up the road from us. And they came to the house one day and I went to church. I think she got baptized and that's what I went to church for. And I just started going. And then I got pregnant. And when I got pregnant, it was nothing like my first pregnancy. My first pregnancy was easy and what the labor wasn't, but I was sick all the time, morning sickness, afternoon sickness, night sickness. My son just gave it to me. Oh, it was not good. And then a couple weeks before, I had stopped going to church because I was just sick all the time. And then a couple weeks before I had him, I just had this feeling. I had this feeling that I was going to die. And I don't know how to explain it. I just had a feeling. And I remember telling my mother-in-law at the time, it was a week before because they scheduled an induction.
And you were still married to this horrible fellow.
Yes. We hadn't gotten divorced yet. So it was about a week before my induction. And I remember telling my mother-in-law at the time that I just had this feeling that something was going to happen. And she was like, oh, you'll be okay. It's your nerves. And then the day of the induction, I remember we were dropping my daughter off and his daughter off at her mom's house so that I could go into the hospital. And I remember hugging my daughter and I remember thinking that I wasn't going to see her again. So I just had that feeling. And so they induced me that night and it was the next day. I was having contractions. The contractions was getting really bad. And I knew something was wrong really the next day because I could feel the contractions in my legs. Oh. And I'd only ever had one other baby, but I didn't experience that with her. And I had an epidural too. So the nurse came in and she would check me from time to time. And then she finally come in. She's like, Shauna, you're dilated to a 10. It's ready to start pushing. The doctor's on her way. And I'm like, okay. And I still felt I even told the nurse, I'm like, something's wrong because I can feel this in my legs. I don't think that's normal. And she's like, no, you're fine. You're dilated to 10. The doctor's on her way. So I was pushing and it hurt really, really, really bad. My doctor came in and she checked me and she said, Shauna, she said, you're only dilated to a 6. I didn't know what to think. And the nurse started arguing with her. So my doctor took the nurse out in the hallway and then she came back with another nurse and had the other nurse check me. And I was only dilated to a 6.
Oh, wow.
And then my doctor was like, okay, you have 2 options. Either you can go like you're going and wait till you get to a 10, but there's a chance that your baby could be born with cerebral palsy. And then she said, you can either do that or you can have an emergency cesarean. We'll take you back right now. And of course I was like, let's do the emergency cesarean.
Were you by yourself in there? You didn't have anyone in there supporting you?
Nobody was in the room at this time. It was just me and the doctor.
Wow.
And as she was turned to walk out of the room, I asked, "What is the chance of death?" And I'll never forget the look on her face. She turned around and she looked at me and she was like she was taken back, because it took her a second to she finally, got her composure, and she turned around and she looked at me and she was like, "Oh, it's just 1%. And that's if you're asleep, you'll be awake." And I was like, okay. By the time she left, my husband at the time had come back in and told him that what was going on. They took me back for this emergency cesarean, and everything went good. My son was born. He was a pretty big baby. He weighed 8 pounds, 6 ounces.
Yeah.
And I got to see him, and he was beautiful. And the next thing I know, they were waking me up, asking me who the president was.
Oh, wow.
And then they'd wake me back up and they'd ask me what year it was, just random questions. The last thing I remember was it was pitch black. And I don't know how to explain it. It was just black. And I was in this very, very dark room. And I was had my hands up in the air, trying to feel for a wall. And I couldn't find a wall, but it was just so black. And I guess while I was doing that, I was moving my hand. And the nurse was like, "Shauna," she was like, "you have to hold still so I can get this in your hand." She was putting the
IV?
It was an IV. It's the kind where they put them into your main arteries.
Oh.
I'm not really sure what the name of it is, but I had 3. I ended up with 3 of them.
Wow.
In 3 main arteries. She was putting one in my hand. And when she said my name, it snapped me out of it. And I just opened my eyes. And that was the last thing I remember. And I woke up in ICU 2 days later on life support when the nurses and the doctors came in and told me everything that happened. And my doctor, my OB, told me that I lost 7 liters of blood.
Wow.
And that our bodies hold 8 liters, and that nobody loses 7 liters of blood and lives through it. And then she told me that it was God, and that there was no reason that I should have lived through that.
At the hospital, they said that. Wow.
Yeah, well, I was in the ICU room. I still had the tubes down my throat and everything. I couldn't respond.
What were you thinking?
My first thought was, why did God save me? After everything that I have done, why did he save me?
That makes me sad, because I just think, instead of thinking of all that I've been through, you're of all that I've done, like you were being punished. Did you a little bit feel like you were being punished?
I didn't feel like I was being punished. I felt like I just didn't understand why he saved me after everything that I have done.
Yeah. Wow. It must have taken a while to recover. I mean, and whoever's listening right now, you can't see what I see right now as we're looking at each other. Beautiful, healthy, great skin color, lovely life coat. Yeah, it's incredible that must have taken a while to heal from.
It did. It took a long time emotionally to heal from.
Yeah.
So my son was, I don't remember if he was a week or 2 weeks old when we left the hospital. I think he was 8 days old when we left the hospital. And that thought just kept pounding in my head, why did he save me? And it ended up sending me into a depression. And that depression lasted until 2016 because I just didn't understand. And I would think, oh, God has a purpose for me. That's why he saved me. And I even went back to church after this. That was a wake-up call for me.
Yeah.
And I went back to church and I started teaching Sunday school, and I was doing Awana on Wednesday nights. And during all this, I ended up divorcing my son's father. Yeah, he ended up cheating on me. And I found out on accident through some investigating on Facebook.
Social media. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, okay. I did go to church, and I consulted my pastor and some elders at church. And of course they were, work it out, do what you can. And I did. I tried. Even though I didn't love him, I still tried. And I put that effort forward. And he didn't want no part of it.
So sorry. Wow. How did you feel after that divorce, being free from that, new lease on life, but also you're going through all this and you're a mother of 2 and you've lived a lot more life now?
So I felt free from him because I didn't have that mental abuse anymore.
Praise the Lord.
And so I believe that was like 2011, 2012, somewhere in that area. And so I did my best to get on my feet, and I got on my feet, and I was actually doing really well, but I was still depressed. And I had a lot of mind drama.
Yeah.
About, what my purpose was, why God saved me. And I had like just mind drama. I really just don't know how else to put it. It was a lot of mind drama. And what happened was in December 2015, I ended up losing everything.
Oh.
So we lost our house. My car got repossessed. Even our phones got shut off. It was literally that bad. Like, we lost everything.
Oh, man.
And so I ended up homeless with 2 kids. And I ended up going to my dad's and asking if we could stay there. And they really didn't have the room at this time. So my daughter ended up sleeping on their couch, and they had a twin mattress. So me and my son shared the twin mattress on one of the spare bedroom floors. And that's where we stayed. And then in that was December 2015. And then in 2016, I was just one day, I was just like, I'm tired of living like this, and something's got to change. And I remember the day that I was sitting on that mattress on the floor, and I just gave it all to God. And that's when everything changed. Like, that was the day that I really handed it over to him. And I told him I just apologized for everything that I ever did. And I believed that he actually forgave me for my sins. And I remember that was the day that I forgave my mom. And wow. I forgave the man that molested me. And I forgave my ex-husband and everybody that had ever done me wrong. And I asked forgiveness for, anything that I've ever done wrong to anybody. Like, it was so freeing. Just felt so freed.
Praise the Lord. And how long has that been since that moment? And what does it look like for you since? I mean, what a special, amazing day.
That is really the day that my relationship with God just really took off. I was able to get back on my feet. I had 3 jobs, but that's what it took to get back on my feet. And I remember I had bought a car for my mom's boyfriend, and I paid $700 for it. And I saved up to buy the car. And I remember just being so grateful for that car every time I got in it, because I had just lost everything. And I was just so grateful. And it just made me look at everything so differently. I did forget to mention when I was living in my dad's basement, and when I had finally just said enough was enough with the drugs and the partying, I did go back to school, and I was the first person in my family to graduate college.
Oh, Shauna, that's amazing.
And I got my college degree.
Wow. Kudos to you. Like, that's incredible. I'm sure your kids your oldest is a teenager, right? Like, I know someday they'll be like, dang, mom's amazing. Look at all she did. They don't always, they're not able to process all this stuff in our lives right now, but like, that's amazing. Good for you.
Yeah.
Here you are getting back on your feet, and you've got that car, and you're just praising God every time you step in, and your life's back on track, and you're growing in your faith. And so you met your current husband online, and he's a believer. And
yeah.
Bring us up to speed with what's going on in your heart, in your walk with the Lord in your home now.
So we got married in 2017. I got the good job. It was actually a job that I thought I would retire from. And then we got married a few months after I started that job. And then everything was going good. In 2019, I found out that I was getting laid off. Like everybody was getting laid off, the entire division. And it was kind of a blow, but they kept me on a little bit longer. So actually my last day was in February of 2020, like literally before the pandemic hit. I thought, I'm just going to go back to selling insurance, because I did that when I was a single mom. And when the time came, I was like, I don't want to sell insurance. I don't want to go back to that. And then, of course, the pandemic hit, and I was like, I just didn't know what to do. And that's when I really was like, okay, God, you saved me for a reason. Why did you save me? And so I started reading some books, some Christian books, and reading the Bible a lot more, and just doing a lot of praying and soul searching. And that's when I felt like it kept leading back to life coaching. So I ended up taking a course, and it was biblical certification to be a life coach. And I did that, but I didn't do anything with it. And I actually got another job, and it was a really good job, and I made really good money. And then I started feeling like my integrity was being challenged. And because it was sales, and the way that they had us selling stuff, I just kind of felt like it was going against my integrity. And so it wasn't sitting well with me. They ended up letting me go from that job in November of 21. So I did what any mom or wife would do, and I took the next job that came along. And I ended up hating that job. I was thankful for it, but it was very strenuous. I ended up leaving that job, but before I left, I was, just doing a lot of praying, and I'm like, okay, this is the third job in less than 2 years. What is going on here? And that's when I really felt like God was really that was my purpose, was to coach other women. And I felt like that's why God kept pulling these jobs away from me. So in September of this year, I left that job. And that's when I decided to just move into my purpose.
What would you say your purpose is now? Because that's been such an important theme.
I believe that my mission is to help women in their 40s to discover their purpose and walk in their purpose. But I believe that my purpose is actually to help single parents. And my mission will help me get there.
That's great. Are you going about that mostly through coaching?
Yeah. So my coaching mostly focusing on women in their 40s that are either going through a midlife crisis or can't deal with the fact that they're going to be turning 50. Those are things that I've dealt with. I recently turned 43, and I just I'm going to be 50 in 7 years. So much I want to do. So actually we cover all 7 areas of life. So your mindset, spiritual, physical, personal, financial, career, we cover everything.
Oh, great.
How you do one thing in life is how you do everything. I haven't yet, but I want to start a ministry where I work with single parents, and that's where I feel like my coaching is going to help me get there. So my mission is to help as many women as I can in their 40s, and then use my spare time to help the single moms. But there's so many times when we're coaching, something that I've been through, that I can pull from that, and I can use my experience to help them.
I'm sure that is so encouraging, because sometimes I think the whole coaching thing, people seem like unrelatable, or they have everything together, or they always have. It's like going to, like a weight clinic, where I went to one once, and everybody worked there was 20 and super skinny and never had a struggle with their weight. So it's like, well, I mean, it's great going, but anyway, I just love, is it just all that you've shared, just even the miracle of your birth and all the difficult, hard things that you've been through, and almost dying, giving birth, and how the Lord's turned that all around. It's just so encouraging. Shauna, is there a verse that you feel like shapes your story?
Definitely Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That has been a verse that has been with me for a very long time. Before we seal up the envelope on this letter of encouragement,
we have prepared a little treat for you that we like to call the PS, so you can see more of the heart and personality of our guest.
Here is your PS.
Are you ready for some bonus questions?
Yes.
What is your most treasured possession? And I'm sure your Bible's number one, but, besides your Bible.
Absolutely. I would like to say coffee. But besides the coffee, my mind. Definitely my mind. I feel like my mind is something that I have worked on over the years, and nobody can take that from me. That's, I kind of my mind and my heart go together, because it's where I keep the scriptures when I need them. So definitely my mind.
Wow. I guess, from your experiences with the church, what would you say is the greatest need in the church today?
I would definitely say coaching. And when I say coaching, I mean coaching for single parents. And the reason that I say that is because when I was a single parent and I would go to church, there was a couple. We had a outsource for the community. So, I would go and I would talk to them, and they were kind of coaching me, but I felt more like they were telling me what to do, and they weren't hearing where I was. They weren't hearing what I was going through. Instead, they were just telling me, go do this, go do that. And coaching is totally different. Coaching is you're listening, and you're bringing, because I believe we all have the answers inside of us that God has given us. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we just need someone to help pull those out of us.
I really like how you said that. That was really great. Along the line of coaching, what are 3 tips you could give people people that you're currently coaching that might help people who are listening right now?
I would say 3 tips would be, the first tip would be, how you do one thing is how you do everything in life. So when I say that, it's like if you have a habit of holding on to stuff, like physical stuff, like you hoard stuff, then you're probably doing that with your feelings. You're probably doing that with unforgiveness. Oh. You're probably doing it in another area of your life. The second one would be to constantly work on renewing your mind.
100%.
Because and the Bible talks about renewing your mind continuously, because it's the closer you get to God, the harder Satan is going to attack you. And he goes for your mind first. He really does.
Yeah. How do you keep your mind? What is reading the scriptures, right? Faith comes by hearing the word of God. And
it's a lot of what you allow to go into your mind. Mm-hmm. So the movies that you watch, the music you listen to, even the people that you associate with, you have to be aware of, the conversations that you're having. Mm-hmm. And, you got to be in the word. You got to be around good Christian people. You got to be around positive people and have positive things going into your mind. The third one was, when you lack faith, to ask God. And when I say that, the thing that comes to mind for me a lot is the woman that touched Jesus's robe. And she said, if I could just touch his robe, I'll be healed. And every time I think of that verse, I just get chills. And I'm like, she believed that. And if we just believe, and then I just get chills.
You know what? I do too, because I was at a tent meeting. I was 19 or 20, and my mother, somebody shared a message on that passage, and the pastor was like, the tent was full of people, and my mom had come with me, and he said, there's one person here. There is a woman here who's been suffering. And it wasn't like a prophetic church or anything like that. He just had this sense on his heart that someone in the crowd. And my mom said in that closing song, after hearing that message, she gave her life to Christ. Oh, during that, isn't that cool?
That is so awesome.
Well, and for everyone listening, you can just hear that Shauna has so much to offer and such encouragement. And if you're on Instagram at all, go find her. Her Instagram is encouraging and has so many great tips. Or if you're looking for, maybe you're like, oh, well, Yes, all the things she's described as me. I'm in my 40s, when am I in my 50s? Or I could use someone who's been through a lot to come along and just coach me, just, DM her on Instagram. Apart from your kiddos, because that's the easy answer, what makes you smile?
My husband. He just makes me laugh, and I feel like he gets me.
Oh, that's great.
He has got the most giving heart. Like he will give and he will help somebody in a heartbeat. And I love that so much about him.
What a blessing to be in a healthy, safe marriage. I'm so glad you get a chance to experience that. What do you love about each of your children?
My daughter, I love her so much because she has such a giving heart. She will do anything for anybody. She just will stop what she's doing and go help them. A lot like my husband. She's just very caring. And my son he's very intelligent and he's very smart. And I just love that about him. And sometimes when I think he's not listening, he was listening. He always proves to me that he was listening. It might be 2 weeks down the road, but he proves that he was listening.
And here we spend so much time repeating everything. Like my husband would say, Meg, it's not an understanding problem. They're hearing everything. I was like, so he's, that's great. He's got those super ears. It's your miracle baby. They probably, when you see him, you just so often think about how, you were born in a miracle. He's a miracle. You've seen so many miracles in your life. How do you feel about that?
Humbled. It reminds me that God is real and that God is capable. Way too often I have conversations with other Christians and you will tell, I've told my story before, and sometimes I felt like they didn't believe me, or they felt like, oh, that was a coincidence. And I think too often that there's too many Christians that they don't feel like God is still doing miracles, and he is. Yeah. And I am a miracle, and I've seen miracles, and I will forever keep those close to my heart because they're a reminder that he's still doing miracles. He's still here. He's still capable.
Amen. And actually, that's what you shared when I had posted a question. Have you gotten to witness a miracle? And then I was so blown away and so moved by your story. And we were strangers, and the Lord brought us together, and I'm so grateful. What is the legacy you want to leave behind, Shauna?
So the legacy that I want to leave behind is I want to help encourage single parents step into their purpose and fill that void that they have, and know that only Jesus can fill that void. I just want to help single parents, encourage them.
I trust Shauna's story encourages you as much as it has encouraged me. Really, just from starting off in birth and the miracle of her son, all those years later in the same hospital. I can't imagine what it means to even lose that much blood. And to think of such a difficult childhood and teen years and teen mom and arranged marriage and all those things. And yet she had that beautiful come to the Lord moment on her couch, and how God has restored so much, and today is using Shauna as a miracle and her son to bless so many and to coach women through hard times. And I'm praying for us today that we have that eye and that soft heart and that faith to know that God is the God of miracles. As a podcast listener, do you sometimes struggle with where should I listen? Which app on my phone was I at, or where was I? Struggle no more. Letters from Home Podcast has our own app in the Google Play and Apple App Store. And guess what? It's free. Just search Letters from Home Podcast in the search bar in your phone's app store and click download. How about that? Then all of our everyday extraordinary faith stories will be right there in one easy place on your phone, so you don't have to go searching anymore. You can just tap the rainbow icon and encouragement is on the way.
Links from our guests will be in the show notes. For more everyday extraordinary faith stories, go to our website, lettersfromhomepodcast.com, and click subscribe or follow on whatever platform you're listening to.
2 Corinthians 3:3. And you show that you are a letter from Christ, delivered by us, written not with ink, but with the Spirit of the living God, not on tablets of stone, but on tablets of human hearts.